new space to create it. And so I spent over like 3 or 4 months conceiving and building this new studio space with like very specifically thick walls, so I can make as much as I wanted and not worry about any neighbors, because in the previous place, the neighbors were always home and complaining, and I was above it. And so it led to some very nice things, which I'm very grateful for. But then within that new space, one of the major upgrades or changes that I got access to was getting or being able to play on an actual upright piano. And I had not had access to the real thing since I was a teenager, and so it made me like excited about writing music again and reconnecting with the real thing and what feels like a living and breathing instrument that responds like slightly differently every time you play, or play around with the mic placement, change things within the instrument. It's just, the options are infinite, and it's been such a pleasure to write it. And so once the album was over, I was like, all right, this is pretty neat. I found a new friend in my piano. It's just like upright for the moment. It doesn't really have any other names, but I'm gonna try to come up with something. And then I was like, all right, it is now the main character of the project. How are we going to translate that over to the live setting? And so it has to stay there because the staircase is like super narrow. I almost lost a finger when they moved it in, and so I would have to tear down every single wall in order to take it out. So it's like just good where it is right now. And so truck was out of the question. I decided to go the crazy route and basically sample and record every single note of the instrument and bring it into the computer. So programming it was like even longer than recording it, but what you've been hearing so far tonight. So instrument inside of the computer. So still very early stakes, but I hope it sounds good on your side. And so this next track heavily relies on this very specific instrument and its own character. It is on the smoother side of things, so I hope you enjoyed. It is called Moru. I would say like especially during like this last year, and basically the last 3 years, which have been kind of weird for everybody. But even prior to that, I definitely like try to remind myself, and it's something I talk very often with my peers, especially like every single day, how grateful I am to be able to be a musician and creative, and on top of that, to be able to do it for your living. But I think that even further than that, like just being a creative period is a privilege and just a blessing, and life would definitely be boring if it weren't for any form of creation. And I think it's something wonderful that is meant to be shared, whether you create together or share with people just to experience it. It truly is something beautiful. That being said, being a creative, especially when it's full-time, does involve a lot of highs and a lot of lows. I've especially hit a lot of those lows in like the last few years, but that being said, I've kind of like come to peace with that specific part of the process, because it does result in some stuff where you're like very emotionally involved. And for me, that like happens a lot in the writing process. That being said, it's kind of like separated from what happens live, because that part of it, I would not be doing it like any other way, because thanks to these guys that you see on stage, I'm able to rediscover the tracks and appreciate them over again, thanks to their musicality and musicianship. And so once again, a big round of applause for Alexis Edina.